A heartbreaking picture shows a terrified mother wolf tangled and imprisoned deep in a shadowed forest. With a somber scream, she turns her beseeching gaze on her little cub and asks, almost as if pleading with the child to save her and release her from the vicious entanglement. But hope is glimmering. An unfathomable, devastating twist is about to break in the baby's eyes. Everything in the heart of an ancient whispering forest, where old trees silently observe the passing. Over time, nature can occasionally provide us sights that are both inspirational and destroy amidst the twisted roots and dappled sunlight on a cool, misty morning. A mother wolf was ensnared in a horrible turn of events near the base of a tall oak tree when the awful tableau appeared. Relics of old, tattered rope and obstinate vines had ensnared her, tying her to the tree as though nature had. Her fur, a patchwork of browns and grays, shone dimly under the filtered light, but it was her eyes that stole the hearts of everyone who watched, filled with anguish, despair, and a deep, unsaid request in a voice barely audible above the sound of leaves rustling. She whimpered softly and stared at a little cub, standing hesitantly The little wolf, only a few months old, appeared to grasp the seriousness as it paced away. Despite the circumstance, its innocent, wide eyes conveyed a mixture of anxiety and a growing optimism, as though it realized that its mother's pain was a desperate cry for assistance, rather than merely a chance misfortune. There was a sad calm in the woodland surrounding them as the cub approached. The mother wolf's shaking, the tangled ties, and the gnarled branches all alluded to the terrible cruelty of nature, contrasted with the loving bond of a mother. However, even in this instance of heartbreaking bond, there was a lingering sense of dread. What if the cub became too terrified or uncertainty was unable to release its mother in time? What if, in spite of the natural desire to assist, fate proved to be too burdensome? This tragic sight, which was portrayed in the delicate interplay of light and shadow, is a burden for such a delicate creature. Set the scene for a powerful emotional journey that questioned if the natural order might never be subdued by compassion, or even if in the never-ending fight for survival. Deep in the middle of an ancient forest, where the air is dense, the strongest relationships will be put to the ultimate test. A tragic drama is put in motion, accompanied by the whisper of ancient leaves and the smell of moist earth, setting the stage for a little clearing illuminated by the gentle glow may tell a moving story of love and grief. With its sweeping branches, an ancient oak tree stands as a silent witness to nature's eternal cycle in the early morning light. Are covered in moss, and their gnarled roots wind like tin across the woodland floor. A heartbreaking scene has been captured beneath its imposing canopy with worn ribbons. Ensnared by a harsh turn of events is a mother wolf thick. Her strong but exhausted body is bound to the ground by tangled vines and pieces of fraying rope. An old tree's fur is matted and uneven, a tapestry of grays and browns worn by innumerable seasons. Eyes that once gleamed with maternal pride and ferocious determination now sparkle with pain and desperation, as each muscle in her body appears taut from exertion as she battles to escape the suffocating grip of nature's own traps, which are now rendered worse by man-made restraints. Tree that is unconcerned and unmoving provides no assistance, but acts as the quiet. A little wolf youngster near the stranded mother is a monument to her sorrow. Watching the horror unfold, shivering with a mixture of terror and perplexity, barely a few months old. The cub's eyes are wide with innocence and a dawning feeling of calm, and their fur is silky and unblemished by adversity. In the silence of that forest clearing, the cub's little frame reflects the harsh reality of its surroundings. It trembles as it waits motionless a short distance away, its instinct telling it to assist. However, because of its inexperience, it is paralyzed with terror. The scenario is infused with a raw emotional intensity, the cries of, in one instant, the mother, the cub's defenseless eyes, and the tree's age-old, uncaring strength all come together. That appears to still time, and the forest itself is silently pervasive throughout this developing drama. Birds were shocked. lift off in a sudden flight of wings, their cries resonating with a lamenting lament as a light breeze rustles. Sunshine filtered through the dense foliage above, seemingly trying to calm the mother wolf's agonized cries. Long, dappled shadows created by the canopy emphasize the scene's sharp contrast. Between the harshness of the circumstances and the splendor of nature, every sound of the old trees creak, the gentle, the hesitant sniffing of the cub, and the whimpers of the ensnared wolf combine to create a melancholy symphony of nature trapped in a period of extreme distress. As the minutes drag on into a torturous eternity, the cub's internal struggle, motivated by an innate desire to defend and take care of its mother, becomes more and more obvious. However, the young wolf hesitates on the margins due to the enormity of the mission. The cub's eyes flickered at every rustle in the underbrush. Its timid steps, filled with trepidation, is focused on its mother, looking for a clue, a ray of hope, or even a quiet command. But the mother wolf's bindings are strong, unforgiving, and brutal, and they are not easily broken. Metaphor for the limitations that nature can place on even the most resilient souls in the behind the worried couple. The forest carries out its age-old customs. Near its waters, a tiny creek rambles softly, reflecting the silent grief of the faint cries of other wolves in the background suggest that there may be a larger pack there. Perhaps this tragedy was oblivious to the misery that was taking place among the splendor of nature, appears to sympathize with and distance themselves from the predicament of the ensnared mother. The first difficulties are, at first glance, the mother wolf's ties are too tightly knotted, and the aged, thick vines provide little possibility of a simple release. The cub lacks the strength and expertise to assist despite having a strong desire to unravel the vicious tangles. The issue calls for more than instinct intervention, but the forest's self-governing laws don't offer a natural cure. Rather, the scene depicts the delicate balance and the brittleness and resiliency of nature in Bear the Raw. This moving moment between survival and care, set against the backdrop of an ancient forest, is a story that sets the stage for an intensely emotional journey. It questions the boundaries of natural instinct, familial obligations, and the enduring strength of mother love. The stranded mother wolf and her reluctant cub are awakened by the forest surrounding them as the early light intensifies, serve as living representations of the fight for survival, a fight in which every second is a test of resolve and every breath is evidence of the optimism that even the tiniest act of kindness might spark the potential for freedom in the following the devastating tableau. There was a delicate silence. The little cub, whom the woodland appeared to call Hope, was left feeling caught between instinct and a strong desire to assist the one. Now, as the early dawn light started to penetrate the thick canopy, the peaceful clearing buzzed with a silent urgency. Every flutter of the wind seemed to echo the mother as shadows swirled around the great oak's twisted roots. Wolf's eyes begged as she whimpered in desperation, her limbs bound by ragged rope and relentless vines, silently for salvation. But the work ahead of the infant was difficult and full of Hope's tiny heart thumped in her chest as she approached uncertainly. Every cautious step was a struggle against her innate terror of the enormous and overwhelming world around her, according to her suffering mother. Unforgiving now appeared to be a continual danger to the cubs, as well as a possible savior. Little impressions were produced in the damp earth as it neared the hefty, delicate paws that was still velvety from youth. The bindings that imprisoned its mother were an act that went against the laws of nature. Appeal for support and affection in a setting where surviving frequently meant abandoning weakness as Hope approached the mother. In a moment that seemed to last forever, Wolf's eyes shone with a blend of thankfulness and anguish. Mother lowered her head, her muzzle quivering, and whimpered a feeble, agonizing cry that was a mixture of grief and a flicker of hope appeared as the cub realized something deep inside him that this was not only a survival test, but a private appeal to restore a damaged relationship. The cub made an awkward and unsure first try, using a delicate snill that, betraying both dread and resolve. Hope started using her tiny, keen teeth to pull at one of the dense vines. Old and sturdy rope resisted the strain, and every tug produced a shock of suffering to the cub's brittle willpower as well as to the binding. The background whispers of the woodland nearly drowned out the sound of the rope straining against the force of her bite. A chorus of faraway bird songs and rustling leaves that seemed to lament the afflicted mother's unfortunate fate. Nearby, the forest carried on with its leisurely, organic rhythm, unconcerned but somehow. A squirrel chattering uneasily in a nearby tree was entangled with the drama taking place under its ancient boughs, and a family of deer stopped to listen, their eyes wide as though they could feel the seriousness of the situation, even though they, once carrying a joyous sense of wild flowers, the wind now seemed to softly moan, echoing the mother's anguish. As the cub's efforts became increasingly frantic, wolf time seemed to slow down. Her tiny form trembled with each strain of the binding as she alternated between yanking at it and flinching in terror. Rope's secret battle was accompanied by emotional suffering in addition to the physical effort. At every moment of opposition, the cub's deep urge to support the one it loves and its natural tendency to run from danger. The cub's eyes flashed with tearful resolve after each unsuccessful attempt to break free the bonds. It was a scene that briefly alleviated the harshness of nature by sending a raw, unfiltered declaration of love between family members during that difficult situation when an unexpected visitor, an injured senior crow, appeared concealed in the underbrush. Watching the bird whose life, in a seemingly planned moment, the forest, which had been characterized by its own struggles for survival, drifted closer. By chance, the crow's head tipped as it landed on a low limb close to the mother wolf. If the sight of this lone witness added another layer of subdued melancholy to the tableau of desperation below, unknown circumstances were causing drama to unfold. Yet the crow's presence seemed to inspire optimism. Its peaceful vigil served as a reminder that the natural world, in all its unadulterated sorrow, was united in its. Being bolstered by the crow's quiet company, the cub gained a little more bravery with reinvigorated. With perseverance and hope, she attempted once more and was successful in releasing one of the thinner threads that was securing her mother's leg. A tiny triumph, while insignificant given the enormity of her mother's restraints, gave the little wolf a new lease on life. In response, Mother Wolf gave a small, appreciative whimper that appeared to be a whispered thank you, and for a brief moment of intimacy was shared between them. But as the cub rejoiced, during this brief victory, a shadow appeared on the clearing, and there was a distant rumble of motors and the sound of approaching footfall, suggesting that people were close by. The unexpected appearance of possible assistance or additional danger added a new level of intricacy of the picture. The cub hesitated, unsure whether to continue its urgent struggle and escaping to safety, the forest, which now possesses ancient wisdom. Every rustle of leaves and its breath again appeared to wonder if this act should family commitment be disrupted by circumstances outside the cub's control. Pounded harder as human voices grew closer, mingling with the forest's murmur and the dim sighs of the wind in that tense situation. Hope had to make a painful choice. She had to decide whether to risk all to try to liberate her mother or to hide in the relative safety of the forest shadows. Packed with the intense, unwavering bond of survival and the raw emotion of this delicate balance between instinct, emotion, and outside intervention sets the stage for maternal love. The backdrop for a significant shift in the forest dynamics and everyone's emotions who saw it, the cubs. Despite being challenging and characterized by several setbacks, struggle served as evidence of the continuing power of hope and the enduring connection between a mother and her infant despite the distant noises of machinery and human voices, indicated that the world beyond the forest sanctuary was getting closer and closer to the resolve in the small. The promise in Wolf's eyes was that even the tiniest act of love may resist the most terrible destiny, as hope persisted in her valiant attempt to release her mother from the tight ties that bound. An unsettling metamorphosis that would challenge all preconceptions started to take shape as she approached the old tree. recounted the heartbreaking moment in which the cubs tugged at the dense vines with determination and awkwardness. At first, it was nothing more than a faint glow that began to radiate from the same bindings that kept the mother wolf captive. Then a slight glow that is hardly noticeable in the early morning forest light. But with every tug, as the radiance grew brighter with each labored breath of the grieving mother, exposing delicate, almost ethereal designs engraved on the rope and vine strands. When the light intensified, the designs became recognizable old symbols that are entwined with the natural world in a mysterious and arcane way. Growth of the vines, these symbols, which were evocative of hallowed sigils and forgotten runes, spoke of an ancient agreement, curse, or ceremony that might be intended to tame a beast rather than just bind it. Hope's natural strength appeared to pause its breath at that very moment. Her mother was the focus of her wide, fearful, and suddenly comprehending gaze, whose eyes now glowed with an unearthly light and a blend of agony. Almost imperceptibly, the mother wolf's face started to alter. The sadness deepened in her cheeks and her eyes, which had previously shown the silent suffering of confinement, now glistened with the recollections of a far-off noble past in a voice that was above the bounds of sound, a voice that seemed as though it were echoing straight into Hope's head. And the mother started talking to her kid, resonating with decades of sorrow and lost respect. I was formerly this forest protector, a spirit of protection and untamed wisdom, but greed and treachery clouded my soul, and as punishment, I was tied to this tree. These bonds are not just vines. They're the remains of a curse that was weaved by those who attempted to usurp our authority were struck with hope like a tidal wave by the revelation. In addition to terror, the cub's heart ached from adorning grief and awe of her mother, the fearsome, untamed. She had always understood that the creature had once been something more, a guardian whose responsibility it was to ensure the equilibrium of The voice said that a vindictive force had long ago placed the curse on the woodland. Either a greedy, corrupt human sorcerer or a furious land spirit who wanted to rule the wilds. Magical energy for his personal benefit. And now those old links shone with the might of that evil magic, forming a visible chain that, as the mystical light pulsed along the ties, had gradually drained the mother wolf's vitality over innumerable seasons. Hope's mind started to flicker with pictures and jumbled recollections. She saw visions of her mother roaming around She saw a period when the forest flourished under her protection, her coat glowing and her eyes full of purpose. A period when humans and the wild coexisted peacefully and when the mysteries of nature were honored. But then came the betrayal. Dark characters, disguised in human avarice, seized the chance to use the forest's magic in an unfortunate turn of events. They cursed the guardian to be bound to a single, immovable tree, depriving her of her freedom and abandoning her to endure generations of suffering. The revelation marked a sea change, point that changed the cub's battle from being one of optimism to only attempting to relieve her mother of bodily binds. She was now carrying the weight of a long-standing curse, and the anguish in her mother's eyes turned into a wordless plea, a message of desperation to restore what had been lost. That broke the curse my child found by reaching out to Hope's inner soul, key that will free me in order to restore the forest's equilibrium. As these thought-provoking remarks reverberated in the clearing, the forest itself appeared to react as the magical tie's light flickered in time with the sound of leaves rustling, as though the old trees were giving their own unspoken advice. An inexplicable blend of fear and hope filled the air, promising that even in the depths of suffering for the human spectators concealed within the suffering, redemption may be possible. Trees and documenting every second with their cameras, the revelation was both startling and poignant. They had arrived to observe a disturbance of the natural order, but they were now privy to a secret legacy that told the tale of the persistent force of nature's own justice. Whispers and guardianship treachery spread quickly, revealing that the mother wolf was not only a victim of bad luck, but also a once-respected guardian who had been cursed by human greed. The natural courtroom had been upended, and everyone in attendance was burdened with generations of concealed truth in that tense instant as the bond's ethereal radiance filled the clearing with a mystical glow. Hop's determination cemented the little cub. Now that she was aware of her mother's terrible past and the extent of the curse that held her back, she felt an urgent impulse to do action. She would have to set out on a dangerous and uncertain expedition to find the secret to lifting the curse and regaining her mother's freedom. This devastating and revolutionary revelation changed. The narrative marked the start of an epic quest to recapture, rather than only a desperate struggle for survival. A lost legacy, and to bring the forest's equilibrium back in the eerie, softer light. Before dawn, as the area is illuminated by the ethereal radiance of the enchanted bine's mystical light, the responses of those who were in the animal kingdom and in the family's heart started to change in surprising ways. The realization that the mother wolf was formerly a forest protector cursed by a deep chord was struck by betrayal and being tied to the ancient oak. Her once desperate eyes now, a silent message that shimmered with a mixture of grief and a slight revived hope, intended to give her small cub hope for the tiny wolf pup who had been observing for a long time. The revelation was a flurry of mixed feelings, the shock of her mother's futile battle against the uncompromising vines. Hearing the ethereal voice of her mother, which evoked recollections of a glorious past, was, at first, the cub's eyes opened in bewilderment. She had known her mother only as a product of impulse and agony. Now seeing that her mother was once a proud, in addition to admiration, guardian, Hope's heart shook under the crushing weight of responsibility. Her natural impulse to assist had evolved into a more intricate and profound quest to shatter the ancient curse and provide her loved one's freedom during that precarious moment. Hope's tiny body moved gently along the ancient ties as the otherworldly light pulsed. Frame trembled as her initial terror of the revelation was overcome by a surge of resolve. The realization that her mother was a fallen guardian rather than just a victim of harsh fate sparked a desire in the cub to pay tribute to a legacy that was too long ignored. With a hesitant but resolute show of hope, she started to tug at the restraints once again, with her jaws working with a renewed sense of purpose, as though the cub's very will could somehow channel the lost strength of her mother's past. There was a mixture of hope and desperation. The sorrow of seeing such suffering and the intense, unwavering love were both reflected in the eyes that shone with silent tears. It inspired her to act like the mother wolf, bound, exhausted, and reacted to her cubs. Her eyes are now filled with deep wells of gratitude and guilt for her efforts. Memories of her time spent roaming freely and ruling as the forest protector caused an old sadness to flare up in. She told her story, one of honor turned to misery in between heaving breaths. Despite being physically crippled by the greed of people who attempted to harness nature's power, the promise. Nevertheless, her soul gently urged Hope to locate the key by communicating in a language older than speech. Freedom, this quiet dialogue of suffering, remorse, and a lasting maternal connection, brought a heavy, almost sacred aura to the area, and the surrounding natural environment responded in its own quiet ways. A lone crow landed on the scene, its eyes expressing a lifetime of silent observation. A low branch of an old oak tree, its solemn yet dignified appearance seemed to, considering the scene's profound sadness. The crow's gentle caw was hardly audible, as a subtle reminder that all of the forest's living things were interrelated in their hardships and victories. The soft sigh of the wind and the rustle of leaves through the oak boughs enhanced the peaceful ambience. Natural chorus that rejoiced in the unwavering hope that glowed in a person's eyes and lamented the loss of freedom. Decided cub at Emily's house, which had already become into a haven for rescued wildlife, and the family was gradually processing the remarkable events that had occurred. Emily's first instinct was intended to provide refuge and consolation, but now she was struggling with the revelation's deep ramifications. She looked over the old photos and letters from her late at night in the peaceful seclusion of their living room. Family history after learning of her grandmother's story of such rescue in the past, in which a wild animal had Emily had a silent epiphany after being viewed as a protector of the country, and she started to view the current tragedy not only as an misfortune that is individual, but part of a lengthy tradition of natural guardianship. In private talks with her spouse, she acknowledged that was being lost to time and exploitation, saying, I used to think that we were just caregivers, but now I see that we have a far deeper duty, one that is connected to an ancient legacy that we must protect. Her spouse, who was first dubious about the emotional appeal of folklore, but has since been won by the obvious bond he saw during dinner between Hope and her ailing mother as. The family talked about the day's events with a mixture of wonder and worry, and he seemed cautiously optimistic. He pondered that perhaps this is a call for us to view the wild with fresh eyes, intended to be more than just spectators. We could hold the secret to reviving a forgotten precious object. Children's formerly innocent curiosity made them realize how serious the situation was. About the outdoors had developed into a very sympathetic comprehension in sketching, sessions at school, and introspective, quiet talks at home. They expressed their thoughts on the mother's situation and the enigmatic magical radiance that had emerged, their naive inquiries. Why is Mommy's pain and our ability to assist her in being freed brought a human touch to the harsh reality of the jungle as the day went on. As time passed and the ethereal radiance progressively diminished, each individual in the group was left to contend with the revelation. The tableau by the oak tree had been permanently changed by the blending of an old curse with unadulterated parental love. Simply saving a wild animal from physical danger was no longer sufficient, given their knowledge of the natural world. The real difficulty was in mending the deep, unseen scars caused by time greed. With unfulfilled promises, the woodland appeared to whisper its own hope in that contemplative quiet, a promise that even the wild spirit remains during the darkest moments, and in that promise, hopes. Her resolute eyes glowed brightly, signifying not just her wish to set her mother free, but also the commencement of an effort to recover a lost legacy and bring the old wood's equilibrium back. As the heartbreaking new levels of complexity emerged beneath the great oak as the conflict between the mother wolf and her resolute cub played out, started to appear that would make their search for freedom more difficult and highlight how delicate wildlife is. Had been a single instance of mother despair and youthful hope, but now showed a web of interrelated obstacles in the human and natural worlds that posed a threat to upset the forest's delicate balance. One new storyline involved the finding a number of enigmatic carvings on the ancient oak's bark as local wildlife specialists, and when historians took a closer look at the tree, they discovered that its worn surface was marked with symbols, and these ancient symbols, which appear to predate any known language, indicated that the tree was more than just a silent observer of the mother wolf's anguish, yet a remnant of a period when the forest was thought to be filled with supernatural abilities that some elders in the area remember, stories of a holy tree that once acted as a bridge connecting the spiritual and natural realms, a tree whose blessings may provide protection and even healing. The wild animals. The existence of these symbols suggested a profound and nearly predetermined bond between the predicament of Mother Wolf and the local folklore, which raises the question of whether her curse and her desperation entanglement was a component of a greater cosmic equilibrium that had simultaneously been upset by contemporary intrusions. Local environmental organizations started organizing, and word of the horrific scene swiftly circulated via community forums, and campaigners debated on social media using hashtags like Sacred Wild and Forest Legacy. That decades of habitat damage had caused the tragedy, which was a sign of a larger environmental problem. One activist, Yudes Carmen, coordinated a number of public demonstrations against the unrelenting push of industrial expansion. Sessions where she provided information demonstrating how recent illicit logging and deforestation have occurred incomparable. She argued fervently that when the natural equilibrium is upset, we observe similar disturbances throughout the forest. Tragedies, according to her, are not isolated instances, but rather the unavoidable reaction of a damaged ecology. Struck a chord with many members of the community, giving calls for more stringent environmental protections and A. Local industrial strategies were re-examined at the same time that the digital world started to reflect the drama that was developing. Social media was inundated with anonymous remarks and viral videos, many of which conjectured about the curse that had allegedly. Online groups discussed whether the mother wolf's restraints were appropriate for the once respected woodland protector, were either a direct result of her battle or a manifestation of an old spell that had spread extensively. A local hiker's posted video revealed the gentle glow of the enchanting, intermittent flashing of the bindings, which some saw as a sign that nature was attempting to convey a secret message through these online conversations that linked the wolf family's personal grief to broader issues of cultural heritage and conservation, incorporating perspectives from folklore aficionados, environmentalists, and even skeptics who doubted that such mystical interpretations could have any basis in truth. The local government's intervention increased attention. Authorities who were informed by growing digital awareness and concerned individuals. Evidence that a group of law enforcement officials and wildlife rescue specialists showed up in the area, adding a new dynamic to the events that were taking place. But their main objective was to make sure. Their arrival provoked intense discussions on the proper degree of protection for the mother wolf and her baby. Some said that human interference in nature's affairs should be kept to a minimum in order to protect the natural order. But some argued that immediate action was necessary to break the symbolic and real bonds that constrained the forest guardian, and the professionals' differing viewpoints made the circumstance as local authorities were torn between the necessity to acting quickly and the requirement to honor the wild's age-old rhythms while maintaining your own interest in the narrative, were becoming increasingly important, and Emily, who had earlier made her house a shelter for rescued animals, felt a deep obligation to respect the forest legacy late one evening as Emily went through old family photos and letters. She came across a faded story from her grandmother about, during a comparable incident, a wild animal that was formerly revered as a guardian, been saved under dire circumstances. This discovery not only linked her family's history to the current situation, but also strengthened her belief that their deed of generosity was a part of a long-forgotten tradition. With newfound vigor, Emily started planning community storytelling events where locals were asked to discuss their individual experiences with nature and consider the idea that the forest had secrets just waiting to be discovered. Be found again in a parallel storyline as Jack the hiker and filmmaker who had recorded each moving moment after receiving a string of mysterious emails from a person posing as the guardian. These inscriptions discussed the forest's secret legacy in poetic words and urged him to look for a fabled relic believed to be interred next to the hallowed oak, which could hold the secret to lifting the curse that had shaken the mother wolf. The correspondence, full of mystery and allegory, started to pull Jack farther into the investigation, blurred the boundaries between mythic quest and scientific inquiry, making his voyage more than just about releasing a confined animal. It evolved into a mission to recover a lost legacy and bring the natural order back. These interrelated subplots, which range from ancient runes to online arguments, had been so brutally disturbed to private family history and enigmatic messages combined to create a complex web of mystery and emotional complexity. They demonstrated that the mother wolf and her cubs' predicament was not a singular tragedy, but rather a little representation of a much greater conflict between old sacred forces and modern exploitation. Gave the story depth with each additional thread, making it more difficult to follow the neighborhood to reflect on the extent to which they were prepared to go in order to restore forest balance in the hours after the atmosphere in the clearing became thick with contradictory information after the curse's shocking announcement and the mysterious discoveries. A scene that was both unearthly and painfully real was witnessed silently by the great oak. There was a profound sadness that blended with a mother wolf still bound by enchanted vines. As the light faded, she experienced a physical and spiritual sense of sadness, with the weight of lost grandeur and betrayed legacy suddenly shining in their eyes. It appeared that request something more than a simple rescue. As the young cubs' optimism wavered, between an overwhelming need to support the emotional. Every creature present felt the weight of the event, creating the conditions for a complex web of internal strife. Despite outside difficulties, the curse was more than just a physical constraint for the mother wolf. It was a chain that bound her to an honorable past and a hopeless future while she battled. Every tense motion against the dense vines was an obvious testament to a legacy she yearned to regain. Flashed with memories of her free-roaming days spent preserving the forest and fostering a natural equilibrium and humanity. But that same gaze also included a deep acceptance and resignation that the forces that had once held her in high regard had betrayed her, causing her to suffer. This internal conflict was evident in her deep, resonant whimpers and the faint tremors of her muzzle accented. Her suffering was both a personal grievance and a metaphorical reflection of nature's. Having only known her mother, wounded spirit Hope the cub was thrown into an emotional maelstrom. When the little puppy learned about her real past, she became a symbol of both intense love and unfathomable grief. Confused and torn, the cub's heart pounded with a medley of feelings, including terror, of the unidentified rage at the injustice, and a growing resolve to lift her mother's long-standing curse each. There was a mixture of hope and fear when someone tried to pull at the bonds. Cub's little body, which was so full of untapped potential, faltered when it encountered the enormous might of nature and a terrible arcane fate. Each pull was a symbolic act, as much as a physical one. Resistance to the darkness that had robbed her mother of her freedom outside of the wolf duo, a cadre's inner circle, comprising human spectators, local wildlife specialists, environmentalists, and even some interested onlookers eagerly anticipated the drama as it developed. Jack, the devoted documentarian, painstakingly documented every detail. His eyes, which had witnessed innumerable natural wonders, were now filled with compassion and a profound sense of urgency. He later wrote in his journal that these eyes have a deep melancholy in them, as though they bear the burden of generations of forgotten honor. Jack's internal conflict reflected the community's strife between the need to step in and the apprehension of upsetting the delicate natural balance of the area. Dr. Elena Morales, a researcher who has been monitoring local environmental changes, voiced her worries about in a private discussion with other specialists, she mentioned an emerging pattern, saying this isn't just an isolated. The curse on this wolf, this chain guardian, is a cry for assistance from the very center of the forest in the case of misfortune, is a representation of the abuse and disregard that have afflicted these regions for far too long. Despite her clinical, struck a deep, melancholy chord, serving as a reminder that nature's wounds are frequently hard to heal and unnoticed. Terrible, but never-ending in Emily's home, where the family had. Emily embraced their duty as caregivers for rescued wildlife for a long time, but the emotional challenges were very personal. In the quiet of the evening, contemplating the meaning of the magical occurrences, I feel as though she whispered that home is more than simply a place to stay. It's a link between our world and the forest's ancient past and its curse. It's the deepest wound we've ever seen. How can we even start to mend something so ancient as her husband's? Her idealism and his pragmatic inclination frequently clashed, and he found it difficult to balance his safety concerns with the strong desire to protect what he now considered to be a holy legacy. Their discussion was gentle and ambiguous. Social media platforms are always a gauge of the greater controversy that engulfed the society. Posts expressing this inner struggle sparked a collective sentiment explosion with hashtags such as Break the Curse and Wild Legacy were popular in the area, with people expressing their own experiences of loss, and some users expressed a feeling that the enigmatic happenings were entwined with hope. Others cautioned that the event was a divine signal to return to the traditional methods of honoring the wild. That such sentimental readings could result in harmful oversimplifications of natures. These online discussions created a further layer of tension by fusing the immediacy of modern technologies with timeless morals and survival issues at that time. Each participant in this, whether beast or human, the drama was enmeshed in a web of internal disputes and outside influences, the mother wolf's wordless cry for freedom. The community's increasing willingness to get in and the cub's shaky resolve combined to create a powerful, complex struggle that was not only about breaking free from physical restraints, but also about combating a history of exploitation and appeal to reinstate the natural order that was once regulated by age-old knowledge and strong, unspoken ties as and the hues of the forest intensified into twilight. The intricate interaction of duty, LED, and emotion left no one. The burden of the curse, the recollection of the previous guardianship, and the pressing need for caring. Intervention all boils down to one moving query. How far are we prepared to go? To travel in order to recover a lost legacy and bring the wild back in an equilibrium. And in doubt was the possibility of change, which even the most trying situations could provide. Hope was born when the dusk turned into a soft twilight with a spooky vibe. Started to seep into the forest clearing where the mother wolf was still shackled to the old oak. The ethereal light from a soft shimmer had replaced the charmed ties, but with it came a growing tension that suggested far. It implied that the forest's fundamental structure held deeper secrets that were just waiting to be revealed, making it more than just a curse. The silent moments following the curse's disclosure, when Hope's resolute eyes blazed with an unexplainable resolve. The ancient oak tree, a silent witness to the cycle, was where the phenomenon first appeared. Of life and grief began to behave strangely. Its leaves had previously. Vines surrounding it started to shimmer with a spooky silver light. Trunk pulsed softly, as though it contained a latent energy that was partially sinister and partially benevolent. The behavior of the tree was eventually interpreted as a call from the past by wildlife scientists who had been surreptitiously observing the region. A clue that the curse may be connected to a long-forgotten ceremony used to summon the wild's untamed spirit. At the same time, Jack C.H., who had been painstakingly recording every detail of the catastrophe as it happened, found a mysterious element that was barely apparent in one of his previous photos. A little sign that mirrored the interaction of light and shadow was carved into the oak's bark. The runes are now dimly shining on the charmed bonds, creating an unexpected echo between the old symbols on the trees, and the magical bindings implied a more profound relationship between the curse and the woodland jack's natural history. His curiosity was piqued by discovery, and he started to believe that the secret to breaking the curse might be concealed. Around the same time, the mother wolf had unintentionally turned the tree into a prison. The internet surged with new, enigmatic posts. Anonymous users started sharing pictures and videos of comparable enchanted symbols that show up on trees in different woodland locations together, with hushed assertions of guardians who once roamed these for woods. Like the non-ancient bond among sacred oak trended locally, causing heated discussions between folklore aficionados and environmentalists, some of whom thought these indications were omens of a protective energy from old magic that had been disturbed by contemporary exploitation. Claimed that the symbols might be connected to covert rites carried out by special interest groups. This flood of digital information brought a contemporary level of curiosity to the ancient methods of manipulating the natural world. Mystery implying that the curse was a component of a more extensive plan scheme, rather than just a random misfortune in a unexpected turn of events. Emily heard a gentle, rhythmic chanting carried by the wind during one of her nighttime vigils. Attracted by the eerie melody, she pursued it to a remote glen where, in the pale moonlight, the voices of a small group of people wearing ragged robes mingled with the rustle, as if they were performing a ceremony. Leaves in a chorus about redemption, revenge, and balance, but Emily could hardly understand what they were saying. Believed that the ancient knowledge required to lift the curse that caused the figures to disappear might be contained in this covert ceremony. Swiftly as they had emerged, leaving only the reverberation of their spells and a revitalized feeling of. There was a sense of urgency among those who saw the occurrence, and there were reports that these were the offspring of the original guardians of the forest, are the custodians of a hidden legacy that holds the key. Local authorities are making things more difficult by releasing the mother wolf. was informed by an unnamed source that a private collector who was said to be captivated by magical objects had lately obtained an old relic that is said to be connected to the forest's mystical powers. The tip stated that this relic, the owner of a worn amulet with the same enigmatic symbol as that found on the bark of the oak. The news caused a stir because the curator is a reclusive person. The community is speculating that this relic could be the final component required to lift the curse, or possibly to increase the defensive power of the forest. The possibility of a concealed relic being added, another layer to the already complex story, a tantalizing hint that might help close the gap between fiction and fact, while conversations grew on the digital front as inexplicable pulsating lights were seen snaking over the treetops in a series of live-stream videos from the woodland as these occurrences increased the intrigue and mystery if the forest itself were attempting to reveal its long-forgotten secrets. Increased hostility between believers and skeptics, with many claiming that the natural world was conveying urgent signals that humanity could not afford to overlook any longer. As the different threads converged, the situation's importance became more apparent. Mother Wolf's predicament was now intertwined within hidden relics, covert ceremonies, and the ancient legacy of guardian magic. Tension that went beyond the confines of the modern world and persisted for generations. The conflict was no longer just about releasing a single entrapped animal, served as a cry to repair the forest's upset equilibrium in order to respect its hallowed history. And in that tense environment, the little cub had to face the exploitation that had shattered the natural order. Stood resolutely, her eyes reflecting the revelation's newfound insights, as well as the difficult obstacles that lay ahead. Cryptic digital messages, the apparition of enigmatic figures, and the use of old symbols had all served to raise the stakes from a straightforward rescue to a significant mission of redemption and repair of the forest with its historic trees and unspoken mysteries have turned into the scene of an eternal conflict between the forces of exploitation and nature's eternal mystical power. In the years after the astounding discovery of new levels of intrigue and intertwined subplots are created by the ancient curse and the mother wolf's fervent plea, started to infiltrate the sorrowful scenario of the mother wolf bound by enchanted into the drama that was developing. Hope had been ignited far away by the vines, the old oak, and the resolute cub. More than just a straightforward rescue effort, it had sparked a community-wide awakening to an old legacy and a covert conflict for local environmental activists already inspired by the forest's essence. The first spectacle began to reveal hints that indicated a lengthy history of enigmatic occurrences in the area at one. Carmen, an enthusiastic supporter of the wild, displayed a number of vintage photos during one of the community gatherings, and records she had meticulously gathered from nearby archives. These records describe comparable instances from decades ago. A famous woodland guardian was allegedly cursed by greed and treachery. According to our forefathers, it mentioned a sacred tree that restrained a protector spirit until Carmen, a courageous person, broke the curse. Described in a voice that trembled with grief and hope, her research not only linked the current tragedy to a forgotten history, but also gave the mother wolf's predicament a nearly legendary dimension at the same time. On social media, rumors started spreading with hashtags like Guardian Curse and Wild Legacy. A team of wildlife photographers and local bloggers began working together to map, identifying the sites of enigmatic, antiquated symbols that had started showing up on trees all around the woodland. One in particular, an eye-catching photograph, showed a fading, run-like lettering on a huge birch tree. These online conversations quickly drew attention to the design that mirrored the symbols that were now dimly flashing on the charmed bindings. Input from environmental scientists and folklore aficionados who argued whether these prehistoric inscriptions were evidence of a protective rite or a curse placed on them by those who had attempted to, in the middle of this digital and historical investigation, master the magic of the forest. Emily was pulled more into the mystery of the legacy of her own family once. Late one evening, a subtle undercurrent in her life suddenly became prominent. Emily found an old leather-bound journal while going through a box of her grandmother's possessions. Its yellowed pages provide in-depth descriptions of her grandmother's experiences with the outdoors. A story of, speaking of saving injured animals, and of times when nature seems to communicate in enigmatic ways. One entry in detailed a similar event in which a once powerful woodland guardian was restrained by mystical forces until when the courageous cub revealed the bond's secret, the revelation struck a deep chord. Emily strengthened her conviction that their participation was a component of a much greater, nearly sacred mission that she started. To host unofficial gatherings at her house where neighbors are invited to share their tales of chance meetings with nature and to talk about the potential that the forest had secrets that were just waiting to be discovered. Jack, the daring climber and filmmaker who documented every second of the first tragedy, was awarded a string of mysterious emails from a signer offering the guardian. These lyrical and mysterious phrases alluded to a secret that may unlock the curse. One message that was read at the glade where the silent oak and the ancient river meet. When Jack's curiosity was piqued, he started comparing these stones to find the key lying beneath them. Indications from the maps and historical information he had gathered suggested that a physical relic, an old relic infused with the forest's lost magic, might be the. His status as a mere observer was changed to an active pursuit of truth by the key to liberating the mother wolf. His most recent blog entries with vivid descriptions and grainy images of moss-covered rocks in a remote glen gained popularity fast among local law enforcement, conservationists, and history buffs. An internal examination of the courthouse's procedures was started as a result of the growing evidence and the zeal of online activism. There were speculations about the surrounding industrial activities and security procedures, that some corporate organizations have been surreptitiously utilizing advanced technology to track. Allegations of wildlife movements using them for personal gain were formerly viewed as fringe. As more digital evidence emerged at a public forum, hypotheses began to gain traction. A security guard described how the emergence of these coincided with odd pauses in surveillance footage. As though someone didn't want these secrets, there are enigmatic ancient symbols on trees. To be seen, he murmured, his voice containing a hint of defiance and terror. This development gave the story a fresh, disturbing turn by raising the possibility that big interests could be involved in. Continuing the curse, in a community workshop, led by the voices of the local environmental group, elders discussed how traditional knowledge and contemporary scientific discoveries coexisted. Tales of guardian creatures from a time when the forest and its inhabitants coexisted peacefully when they were young. Conservationists displayed environmental data and satellite photos that connected recent industrial intrusions to the greater occurrence of mystical occurrences in the forest. The conversation was as sophisticated and heated as participants discussed whether human greed caused the current crisis directly, or if it was a normal cyclical reaction to disturbance in this melting pot of historical records and digital activism. Intimate revelations, the mother wolf's predicament and hope's unwavering, will become potent representations of a increasingly extensive conflict. The community was forced to think on how ancient traditions, contemporary exploitation, and nature's unwavering power came together. One tragic moment in which the linked subplots from the enigmatic, the guardian's enigmatic warnings to Emily's rediscovered family, and the engravings on the revered oak law created a web of intrigue that forced everyone to reconsider how they interacted with the wild. The idea was supported by a blurry film clip of shadowy individuals near logging roads or a faded diary post. Believed the forest had a history of both beauty and treachery and was a living thing. Along with giving the main story more depth, the subplots linked the different characters' personal tales, such as Emily and Jack's response to the community's broader environmental crisis and the state of the abandoned. The old curse that bonded their guardian and wolves had become a rallying cry, a plea to reestablish equilibrium, respect lost traditions, and address the exploitation that endangered the very. There was a noticeable tension in the forest as the first rays of dawn battled to penetrate the thick canopy. The mysterious glow of the magical vines and the forest clearing, where the mother wolf was still tethered to the old oak, had faded to a faint gleam But the curse's disclosures and the long-forgotten legacy now loomed large over the scene, as if to foreshadow the tensions that had been building between natures. Between ancient mysticism and contemporary exploitation, a harsh reality and the possibility of salvation were on the horizon. The little cub stood shaking next to her as she came to a head in that tense moment of hope. Burdening mother with her newly discovered understanding of her mother's noble heritage as a forest protector and of, with each unsuccessful tug of the shackles, the curse that now imprisoned her crushed down on her tiny heart. Her cautious tug with her small teeth echoed the intensity of an unmet promise, and the forest appeared too. Even the gentle rustle of leaves was subdued, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Knowing that the turning point had come, the ancient oak started to show faint indications of change surrounding the clearing. The patterns on the bark, which had previously been adorned with mysterious runes and symbols, began to pulse in time with the fading light. Now that the ethereal glow was shining on the vines, they seemed to change and ripple like a living script. A silent, deep beyond these occurrences, communication from the woodlands sparked and expanding. Hope that the curse was a dynamic force rather than a static, unalterable force, wound in the wild one's fabric that could be repaired with a correct key. Meanwhile, the human community's voices were already agitated by the earlier. Community gatherings and digital outpourings started to coalesce into a single appeal for environmental action. In quiet groups close to the perimeter of the area, activists, local historians, and even dubious officials had assembled. Forrest talking about the ramifications of the latest findings. A well-known local activist stated that the suffering of one mother wolf is not unique to our forest. Rather, it is a representation of how our entire forest is being misused and forgotten. We need to take action right away before the curse's hold becomes irreversibly tight. Her words reverberated throughout drawing a line in the sand in community hall and online forum corridors. Between passivity and assertive action in the thick forest, Jack, the courageous documentarian, examined his. With increasing eagerness, he took notes and took pictures, capturing every aspect from the changing glow of the magical. Due to the heartbroken look in his CHB's eyes, he now understood what he had done, had acquired a new meaning. His recordings were the clarion, not just proof of a terrible event, reminder of a profound injustice that lasted for millennia and a secret legacy. In his journal, he described a scene where the ancient forest powers collide with something monumental. Because of the disregard of the current world, the destiny of this guardian and her child is now entwined with our very souls. Meanwhile, a group of local scholars and conservationists gathered in a nearby clearing in the wilderness. In a spontaneous gathering, they engaged in heated discussion over a worn map laid out on an improvised table that identified the sites of comparable old symbols found in the woodland. One elder's voice shook with a mixture of respect and grief, brought to mind ancient tales of a holy rite that was formerly employed to lift curses from. If we can locate the misplaced key, nature will reunite guardian spirits with a wild heart. The relic is reported to be. We might break this curse and restore balance if we hide close to the sacred glade, he said, his eyes sparkling with unshed tears. His words gave the whirling chaos a concrete objective, a last component of the riddle that, at that crucial juncture, may either free the mother wolf or sentence her to eternal bondage. As public concerns grew, local administrations, supported by digital data, announced measures to intervene. A special task committee was established to look into the potential that the continuation of the curse has been attributed to corporate interests, and there were reports that a powerful local, a developer with covert connections to technical surveillance and industrial logging, may be responsible for the enigmatic manipulation of the forest's age-old enchantment. This fresh perspective added a feeling of urgency and peril to considering the already unstable circumstances, the possibility that human desire was not just physically. Conservationists were inspired to take action when the forest was destroyed and its spiritual essence was tainted. As the morning progressed, and the ghostly light on the bindings pulsed with activity back at the center of the clearing, the cub's eyes, which had previously been filled with hope, solidified with newfound intensity. Now, a fiery determination born of love blazed through the innocent uncertainty. With the intense desire to return her mother's freedom at that precise moment, the conflict evolved from an act of turning a straightforward rescue into an epic journey to find the ancient relic and break the curse and bring the guardian spirit that formerly defended the woodland back to life. Bringing together these disparate forces, the ethereal revelations on the tree, and the passionate discussions within the community. The growing physical and digital proof of exploitation combined with the internal conflict of a resolute cub came to a. Meanwhile, the wolves that had been left behind in the forest itself appear to be pleading for redemption and the restoration of equilibrium that had long been disregarded during the contentious period by corporate avarice and the relentless march of modernity. Every last being in attendance, from the conservationist's weeping visage to Hope's unwavering look, saw that it was time to take immediate action because the mother wolf's fate and the purity of the whole forest now rested on a precarious balance that would soon tip either in the direction of salvation or irreparable ruin. As the woodland contained its collective and the spectral light of the enchanted binds pulsed with increased intensity. Breathe, the community's eagerly anticipated confrontational moment has finally arrived. A small group of resolute people and local conservationists had assembled next to the old oak where the mother wolf was still restrained, and there was a lot of excitement and a mixture of hope and sadness. Each muttered legend and digital hint had brought us to this pivotal moment where the cursed Jack would use his camera to directly address the ancient symbols and the cries of a distraught cub. Draped over his shoulder and his journal firmly grasped in his palm, he emerged from the crowd of witnesses. He spoke to everyone in a firm, determined voice that reverberated over the area. As of right now, our research has reached the moment of truth, he said, has exposed the dark legacy behind this guardian cap, in addition to the brutal physical bindings that keep it imprisoned. They were cursed long ago by individuals who wished to use them out of greed and betrayal. Control the enchantment of the forest. We cannot watch helplessly while this age-old injustice continues to rob the very essence of. His remarks were greeted by nods of resolve and murmurs of agreement from local elders and conservationists. Even the few skeptics there at the time, Emily, whose house had been turned into a refuge for rescued animals, and whose heart had always been bound up with the fate of the forest, came forward with tears in her eyes, and looked around the assembled throng with a fierce sense of resolution before she started quietly. I've realized that our role is not just to offer refuge, but also to act as guardians of this historic legacy. My grandmother used to tell me tales of a period when guardians ruled the forest and their spirits guarded the. We have the opportunity to restore the natural equilibrium today in order to break the curve that has restrained this noble soul for. Her overly intimate and ancestral memory-infused remarks evoked a strong feeling of urgency among those in attendance in reaction to a group of local. Carmen, an environmental activist, presented a proposal that had been formulated after weeks of investigation and, following a community discussion, Ken outlined a strategy to locate the ancient relic that is thought to be concealed close to the holy. According to local legend, Glenn's relic contained the secret to breaking the. Carmen excitedly argued that if we can find this relic, we might be able to break the enchantment that restrains our woodland guardian. This is not a simple process. It will need bravery, solidarity, and the fortitude of our collective determination. The suggestion was, many were both excited and nervous, realizing that the relic might be the crucial turning point. While some were concerned about the risks of exploring long-forgotten mysteries, others want to rescue the mother wolf. At the same time, local officials who had been keeping an eye on the situation with increasing alarm because of previous reports of technology disruption and corporate intrusion declared that they will assist the community's initiatives with a specialized wildlife rescue squad, which is made up of professionals with knowledge of both. The mother wolf has to be gently removed from her ties by behavior and environmental forensics while maintaining the antiquated symbols that could contain the key to the cur's goal. One official said in a restoring the natural order while preserving the spiritual past contained inside these woods requires a controlled tone. Despite being cautious, their assurance offered some hope that human intervention, when directed by, in fact, as preparations, empathy and respect, might coexist peacefully with the wild. The anxiety in the area grew almost palpable as the rescue and the relic hunting expedition gathered pace. Despite her pain, Mother Wolf seemed to find the inner power too. Her eyes were a reflection of the regal grandeur that accompanied her current situation. Sadness and a glimmer of optimism focused on her young cub, whose resolute posture and quivering determination assured her that she would exert every effort to lift the curse in that quiet conversation. The actual stakes of the conflict were revealed. It was a fight not just for freedom, but also for the survival of the. In a final, pivotal moment, the community as a whole pledged their. Elders performed blessings and ancestral prayers as part of a solemn ceremony held beneath the great oak. These words, which reverberated across the clearing, were a potent assertion to call upon the forest's guardian spirits. That we stand here as one, and that the battle to lift the curse was as much as spiritual as a physical one. The elder declared in a voice full of pride and grief that he would restore. Human greed and forgotten honor have shattered the peace with that pronouncement, the groundwork for a daring, coordinated legal strategy was established. Teams would formally complain about the environmental abuse that had resulted in to the curse as the impartial monitoring committee started looking for the historic relic that could simultaneously flip the bindings the wildlife rescue crew outfitted with. Using cutting-edge technology and being guided by profound respect for the forest traditions, the mother was painstakingly extracted. Free the wolf from her restraints without causing damage to the antiquated symbols that contain the key to her history as the first light of dawn crept above the horizon, casting a gentle, hopeful glow across the clearing each time. Each person in attendance recognized the seriousness of their group's commitment and realized that the road ahead was risky and unknown, but they were bound together by an unwavering determination to restore harmony and respect for the ancient. Preserve the wilderness from exploitation at that time as the community made its first firm move to lift the curse, and the forest let forth a soft sigh of relief. As twilight grew deeper into the forest's embrace of night, the precious trust between humans and nature was reclaimed. A silent energy flowed through the clearing beneath the old oak, a battlefield where the powers of both contemporary intervention and ancient magic were waiting for a decisive battle. The mother wolf was still bound by her resolute cub and the enchanted vines that flashed dimly with enigmatic runes. Now, hope was at the heart of a titanic battle, and every aspect of the scenario, the cub's quivering eyes, the gnarled oak bark, and the ethereal sheen of the bindings came together too. A tense moment that held the potential of either salvation or irreparable damage. As local elders, wildlife, and community environmental activists assembled, the atmosphere was electrifying. The clearing was surrounded by specialists who had assembled not just as witnesses, but as contributors to a cause that went beyond the current disaster. Each muttered prayer, each told tale of every digital post using hashtags like #BreakTheCurse and Wild Legacy under the ancestral guardianship had brought them to. The air was thick with expectation at this pivotal moment. Even the wind seemed to. Jack stood close to the edge of the area, holding its breath as though nature itself was anticipating what would happen. Clearing went over his notes one last time in his journal, which was full with personal. He wrote down the specifics of the day's events, which are now filled with urgency. We are at the beginning of a new era. His comments, which were shaking with both joy and dread, conveyed the acute knowledge that the mother's fate, wolves, and thus the forest's equilibrium were at jeopardy. This was the culmination of all the evidence, including the old runes and the Guardian's mysterious messages. Officer Ryan was close by at one point, and his change from a cold enforcer to a caring guardian who had turned into a neighborhood beacon of hope spoke steadily to the crowd. Tonight, we are the result of our efforts, he said in a voice that echoed the inner maelstrom inside of him. Our woodland guardian is bound by a curse that is more than just a network of vines and forgotten spells. It is a symbol. We must now unite in our efforts to lift the curse of the exploitation that has afflicted these woods for generations. Restore harmony to the wild. His words reverberated throughout the group, igniting a roar of shared determination as they. In that tense moment, the ancient oak was ready for the critical deed that lay ahead. With its weathered bark and glowing symbols, the tree appears to have a life of its own, with its rhythmic glow synced with. The entranced heard the forest's gentle hum, a natural heartbeat that echoed the urgency of the situation. The mother wolf's ties flashed together as though the forest's energy was building up too. It seemed as if the oak itself was providing a hint to aid in her liberation. Its ancient, enigmatic tradition may provide the secret to breaking the curse. Suddenly, the silence was broken by. The distant footsteps and whispers are an indication that environmental rescue and municipal authorities are on the scene. Teams were coming to assist with the community's intervention. Their arrival meant that the conflict was over. A single battle, but a group endeavor that covered the whole area. A small group of experts, headed by Dr. Elena Morales, was one of them, whose environmental data and satellite photography had shown a troubling connection between industry. Her most recent research had revealed a layer of encroachment and the forest's anguish. Urgency warning that the harmful forces of modern exploitation would tighten if the curse was not broken quickly. Their hold on the wilderness, as the rescue crew assembled their tools and started making meticulous preparations to. The people gathered in a tight circle to remove the mother wolf without upsetting the old symbols. The clearing's aura changed around her when a man, one of the village elders, renowned for his extensive understanding of indigenous law, stepped forward, and his seasoned voice bore the burden of. For millennia, our forefathers believed that when there was a significant imbalance, the spirit of the wild seeks to remind us of our sacred obligation. This is a call for us. His words, which are rooted in tradition, aim to recognize the genuine guardianship of nature and restore what has been lost. Respect prepared the ground for the eventual last concerted attempt to break the curse and recover the lost harmony of the forest at that pivotal moment. Whether human or animal, the soul felt the weight of the decision in front of them. The mother wolf's eyes are now a mirror. As if in silence, her cub's eyes were fixed with those of old grief and knit hope. The resolve in Hope's eyes was a brazen challenge to the powers that attempted to hinder her from doing what she needed to do. The community's varied voices were heard as the mother bounded across the clearing. A unified resonant voice was formed by activists, elders, scientists, and officials. Demand justice as the first rays of morning appeared on the horizon, soaking the clearing under a gentle golden glow. It became evident that the forest's destiny depended on the decisions that would be. Captured in these last seconds, the community was now on the brink of change, a pivotal moment, where the exploitation would go on or where the old curse could be lifted and the natural order restored. Unchecked, the forest plunges the wild into even greater despair. The scene was prepared for the decisive battle with a fearless, united front, animated with both ancient magic and contemporary resolve. Move that would eternally alter the forest's fate, that fateful evening when the sky grew deeper to a. The ancient forest was swept by a chilly breeze and a bruise of light, setting the scene for the moment that would decide the mother wolf's and her courageous cubs' fate beneath the Nile branches. Under the old oak where the cursed vines were still glowing dimly with enigmatic markings, a dense, almost palpable. The air seemed to vibrate with the collected anguish and unspoken promises as silence descended upon the clearing. Many ages ago, in the center of which the mother wolf was bound by, her tear-streaked eyes were raised by enchanted vines and a tree that had become both her jail and her legacy. Her eyes were full of despair and hope, and she whispered softly, "Breaking the curse on my child." In her eyes, the plea was a moving reverberation of long-standing grief, a cry to liberate me and bring our holy forest back into harmony. Not just for physical freedom, but also for the redemption of a history tainted by human greed and treachery. For the little cub shuddered as she watched, her heart thumping now with a mixture of terror, resolve, and a growing feeling of duty. Returning to her mother, she tried her hardest to assist, but the task seemed. The dense, tattered bindings that suffocated the woodland guardian were not only formidable. A physical confinement, but also a representation of the curse that had long robbed her mother of her independence and self-respect. The cub paused in agony, torn between the deep, unwavering want to act and the inclination to run. The ancient runes on the bindings pulsed with a gentle glow that seemed to be triggered by an invisible force, with an enigmatic glow that seemed to be intensifying with every heartbeat, as if the very spirit of the forest's throbbing light was a wake-up call for hope to overcome her fear. Showed elaborate designs on the vines, a coded message that suggested a secret key, and a relic that had been lost to time, had the ability to lift the curse during that tense moment, and every creature in the mother wolf's eyes shone with a mixture of agony and a powerful, even rebellious optimism as the clearing appeared to pause. My child's gaze seemed to convey that the secret is hidden beneath the sacred glen's stones, where the ancient river meets only you can find it in the middle of the wilderness, and release me from these restraints. Unspoken but unmistakable words rang in Hope's ears, and the cub sensed the load of love, duty, and destiny's weight bearing down on her tiny shoulders. And Hope took a shuddering step away as the frantic need to recover what had been lost called up every last bit of bravery. Her pulse raced as she ran toward the edge of the clearing from the base of the great oak, led by a renewed resolve. Each step was risky, and the jungle was dense and dark, of unknown dangers, but the cub persisted out of a frantic need to preserve. As Hope advanced farther into the forest, the noises of her mother's passing and the restoration of their once noble ancestry, the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of the old river appeared to give nature an unearthly character, to create an encouraging melody that propels her ahead, led by instinct. Given the recollection of her mother's entreating stare, she finally arrived at the revered glen, a remote area covered in moss. Hope found a tiny crystal beneath a group of worn stones where the air glistened with an ancient vitality. The surface of an elaborately carved amulet that was partially buried in the soft earth bore the same. The enigmatic symbols that covered the cursed vines pulsed softly, perhaps alive with the secret power of the forest hopes. Her mother had subtly promised a physical manifestation, and this relic was the key that made her heart leap. She clutched the amulet in her small jaws and firmly grasped the ancient law that bound their fates. Turned around, feeling every second as her way was illuminated by the relic's gentle brightness. Yelled with the promise of transformation back at the ancient woodland, which had before been a mute observer. As optimism returned, Oak was met with a heartbreaking scene. The mother wolf having felt a slight shift in the cub's movement as Hope got close to the amulet, started to emit a dazzling light that gradually dispelled the evil magic that had been trapped in place as it traveled along the cursed vines. After holding her captive for so long, the bonds were released with every pulsating pulse of light, resulting in a bittersweet liberation that was both agonizing and hopeful, and at a last devastating moment, a profound. The mother wolf's release, not agony, was the source of the resounding howl that reverberated around the clearing. Her eyes closed as though in relaxation as her enchanted shackles fell gently to the forest floor, yet the triumph was bittersweet. She was exhausted by the procedure, leaving her with a weakened and shattered sense of hope. Hurried to her side and gave her a gentle, urgent nuzzle, perhaps to comfort her mother despite her sobbing cry of grief. And triumph mixed in the clear morning air at that final scene in the forest itself appeared to weep, and a gentle, melancholy rain started to fall, sweeping across the ancient oak. Mother and cub's loving reunion, and the great sacrifice, and the high price of freedom were exposed to everyone who saw the wild in all its unending brutality, and one final heartbreaking lesson that compassion had imparted was that even the most severe natural wounds might be healed, but at a cost that permeates all living things. When the gentle morning light seeped through the melancholy image appeared to be relieved by the forest's towering canopy of old trees. Thing had taken place where a mother wolf bound by the base of the old oak. Cruel vines and the remains of forgotten ropes had begged for freedom and silence, and her resolute cub. In the peaceful aftermath of the forest, Hope had begun a risky journey to break the curse, which was now coming to an end. Witnessed the final minutes of the event, which included both a heartbreaking parting and the lovely promise of regeneration. With the rebirth of hope in the old amulet, struggle had been engraved in the hearts of all living things. The magical relic, held in her jaws, started to emit a dazzling cleansing. The mother wolf's captivity's cursed bindings shimmered and gradually started to untangle each pulse of. That ethereal glow represented a step toward liberation, the agonizing but essential dismantling of the evil spell that had, in a final moment that appeared to combine agony and hope, crushed the guardian's once mighty spirit. After being released from her bonds, the mother wolf slumped, letting out a deep, resonating howl that represented both release and sadness. Her eyes closed in a moment of bittersweet calm as tears blended with the rain as she fell gently to the forest floor. In that last tableau, the forest itself sobbed as the gentle sound of rain swept across. As though nature were favoring the reclamation of a lost legacy, the old oak and the loving reunion of mother and child. The incident served as a moving reminder of the price of atonement and the sacrifices necessary to free oneself from the bonds of the past, exploitation, and to bring all of the animals in the clearing back into harmony with nature. From the quiet, vigilant crow sitting on a neighboring branch to the shy little deer watching from the edge of the. For Emily and her family, woodlands appear to partake in the optimism and anguish that pervaded the atmosphere. Having long viewed their house as a refuge for rescued wildlife, that day changed their perspective on. What started as a last-ditch act of rescue had developed into compassion and stewardship, into a deep journey with the goal of honoring the ancient bonds that held humanity to the nature during peaceful times. Following the experience, Emily thought back on her family's history and recalled tales, transmitted the mother wolf's revelation via generations of guardianship and ties to the natural world. Once a cherished guardian, he was cursed by treachery and grief, which gave their task a new purpose. It was not only about saving a single species, it was also about reviving a holy legacy and making sure that the wild continued to be a. Local conservationists and community leaders came together in support of the site of wonder and balance, motivated by the following heartbreaking yet miraculous incidents. They promised to start projects to protect the integrity of the forest, including more thorough wildlife protection and stronger laws against industrial encroachment. Initiatives the establishment of an impartial oversight body made up of legal professionals and environmental scientists. As part of their collective mandate, community activists and indigenous representatives turned into a beacon of hope for the future. Was evident to guarantee that the forest would never again be subjected to the exploitation and neglect that had once plagued it. Let to thrive in the interim, while Jack, the committed documentarian who had recorded every tear and tremor of the drama that was playing out, was documented in a local magazine that received a lot of readers. His sincere. The story detailed not only the heartbreaking conflict between a mother and her child, but also the significant metamorphosis of a community became aware of how urgently its natural heritage needed to be protected in the. We discovered that, despite intense sadness, there's an unquenchable glimmer of optimism in Heart of the Wild. Spark that, with the right care, can bring back the natural equilibrium between humans and the environment when the battle started, the internet was ablaze with encouraging posts and hashtags, such as John Wild Legacy, Break the Curse, and Forest Guardian, which became popular on social media and brought people from all walks of life share their own experiences on social media for a common cause, with the mysteries of nature and demanded action to keep the forest safe for more. The voices of those directly engaged were amplified by this outpouring of digital support, but also raised awareness of the value of protecting the wild in the days that followed as part of recovery efforts started, and the forest gradually recovered from the wounds caused by the curse and the legacy of that terrible yet transforming event. Despite being weakened by her experience, the mother wolf persisted in inspiring transformation, remained a representation of tenacity and the eternal strength of mother love. Her silent appreciation was expressed through her kind gazes and faint whimpers toward her youngster were a living example of the hope that even the most severe wounds may heal, may be repaired during this time of reflection. The community came together with a renewed resolve to respect and defend their natural environment. They discovered that the most heartbreaking hardships may occasionally produce the most brilliant sparks of. I hope the wild was more than just a place of unrelenting brutality. It was also an area of deep connection where a future of harmonious coexistence and a revival of old legacies could be. We are grateful that you joined us on this incredibly poignant journey of hope and sadness in the mother wolf's narrative. Bound to an old oak tree and her courageous cub Hope, who had the courage to lift the curse. If moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. In our battle to save the natural world and its age-old wisdom for future generations, assistance is essential. Watch this space for more gripping tales that honor the inseparable connection between people and the natural world. Together, let's speak up to protect our natural inheritance.